I've been thinking a lot about the world recently and how it's changed over the last 20, 30, 40 years. 20 or 30 years ago, if a chicken caught a cold and sneezed and died in a remote village in East Asia, it would have been a tragedy for the chicken and its closest relatives. But I don't think there was much possibility of us fearing a global pandemic and the deaths of millions. 20 or 30 years ago, if a bank in North America lent too much money to some people who couldn't afford to pay it back and the bank went bust, that was bad for the lender and bad for the borrower. But we didn't imagine it would bring the global economic system to its knees for nearly a decade. This is globalization. This is the miracle that has enabled us to transship our bodies and our minds and our words and our pictures and our ideas and our teaching and our learning around the planet ever faster and ever cheaper. It's brought a lot of bad stuff, like the stuff that I just described, but it's also brought a lot of good stuff. A lot of us are not aware of the extraordinary successes of the Millennium Development Goals, several of which have achieved their targets long before the due date. That proves that the species of humanity is capable of achieving extraordinary progress if it really acts together and it really tries hard. Traffic light colors, red, amber, and green, are used to indicate food's nutritional values according to the healthy standard. Different colors represent different food types, so that people can determine what to eat when they need some certain types of nutrient. The responsibility to label food properly on the packages is on the retailers. Thus, consumers can be aware of food with less salt or less fat. This system makes it easier for consumer to make decisions. Aquaculture, the farming of fish, shrimp, shellfish, and seaweeds, has been the sources of human protein for nearly 4,000 years, especially in Asia. In the last decade, however, there has been unprecedented growth in aquaculture production, more than 300% since 1984, which has increased the importance of the modern food supply. It's the world's fastest-growing food production activity, and globally, more than 25% of the odd fishing and shellfish production in 1999 was attributable to aquaculture. Yes, this industry's contributions to human diet is actually greater than the numbers imply, whereas 1/3 of the conventional fish catch is used to make fish meal and fish oil. Virtually all farmed fish are used as human food. Today, nearly 1/3 of fish consumed by human is the product of aquaculture, and that percentage will only increase as aquaculture expands the world's conventional fish catch. For the oceans and lakes continues to decline because of overfishing and environmental damage. The biotech engineering has undergone 3 phases. In the first phase, people designed and made some simple machines, which aimed to help people understand ourselves. And first group of people that realized we could learn from ourselves were engineers. And then, based on the studies, people began to make complicated devices, in order to cure wounds, like the practice of suture, and to study physiology. This is the second phase. Later, since we went into the third phase, more complicated machines have been developed, like ECG electrocardiography, able to have an insight of your internal body without intruding it, which can show the human brain's functions. X-ray is a good example. In an X-ray picture, you can see the bright area is the heart with some vessels around, and the dark area is the lungs. These devices benefit humans greatly in solving health problems, such as diseases. Over the past 5 years, the wage growth is about 5%, which is very weak. Meanwhile, consumption has grown by about 15%, which seems decent. However, housing debt has increased by about 40%, which is unusual, but can be understandable after the wage and consumption increase. The increase in wages is far from sufficient to cover the increase in consumption. The increase in consumption is not because of the increase in income, but because people are borrowing more money to buy homes. Although people's wages increase, most of the money will go against paying household debt, because people spend a lot of money at home. In India, a lot of people are working as community service workers. Quarterly meetings are held in order to provide training and consultation to them, and thus they can understand how to prevent diseases from spreading throughout the communities, such as HIV, which is difficult to be controlled. Such precaution knowledge is taught by professionals from large hospitals and organizations. But in some cities, large consultation is not suitable because it is hard for target groups to meet, who live in remote areas. To deliver training to them, professional teams have to go across rivers. Thanks for this opportunity to speak about Australia's engagement with Asia from the perspective of trade, and in particular to say a few words about what trade is doing in this space. And I'm particularly pleased to be addressing trade and investment, not just, of course, because these two things are inextricably linked, but also, of course, because Australia reports to Australia's first ever Minister for Trade and Investment. Asia's importance to Australia's economy is growing by the day. It is one of the most important factors to consider when assessing the international conditions for national prosperity. Asian demand for our exports has helped Australia manage the global financial crisis better than most other developed economies. In fact, probably better than all other developed economies. An investment from Asia has added to the productive capacity of the economy and to overall productivity in 2013. 7 of our top 10 export markets were in Asia and represented 65% of our total exports. Asian markets and Australia's geographic proximity are critical not just for our trade ties and our capacity to access important global supply chains, but also to the level of foreign investment in Australia. FDI has grown markedly in Australia over the past decade. In fact, it has more than doubled from about $292 billion to $630 billion in 2013. I'm just going to take on where stuff left off. The hormone I want to now talk about is called melatonin. The synthesis is in the pineal gland, which is very small. It is the size of a pea in your brain. Descartes called it the seat of soul, and it is where melatonin is made. And it has a rhythm as well. And in a sense, it is the opposite of the cortisol. It peaks at night. We call it as the darkness hormone. In every species that we studied, melatonin occurs at night. And it's hormone that prepares you for the things that your species does at night. So, of course, in humans we sleep, but animals, like rodents, they are awake. So, it's a hormone that is related to darkness behavior. Honeybees do a waggle dance to direct other bees to the source of nectar. The dancing bees like this one can be halted by a headbutt from another bee. Now research has found that this headbutt is actually a warning signal. A feeding station was set up in the lab to mimic the source of nectar, then foraging bees were introduced to the dangers at the station, such as competition from rival colonies. When foragers returned to the hive they stopped bees dancing. Scientists think the behavior warns dancers of a dangerous source of nectar. Protons are finally transferred to the LHC, both in a clockwise and an anti-clockwise direction where they are accelerated for 20 minutes to 6.5 TeV. Beams circulate for many hours inside the LHC beam pipes under normal operating conditions. For each collision, the physicist's goal is to count, track and characterize all the different particles. The charge of the particle, for instance, is obvious since particles with positive electric charge bend one way and those with negative charge bend the opposite way. Also, the momentum of the particle can be determined. Large Hadron Collider, LHC, is the world's largest particle accelerator, lies in a tunnel. The LHC is a ring roughly 28 kilometers around that accelerates protons almost to the speed of light before colliding them head-on. Protons are particles found in the atomic nucleus, roughly 1,000 millionth of a meter in size. The LHC starts with a bottle of hydrogen gas, which is sent through an electric field to strip away the electrons, leaving just the protons. Electric and magnetic fields are the key to a particle accelerator.